Welcome back to Paul's Tech News. October's on, my friends, albeit somewhat haltingly this week, as things kicked off with an Amazon Web Services outage that seemed to take out about half of the internet. And though the root cause was fairly mundane, it has provoked a deep introspective wave of discussion about the stability of digital infrastructure and over-reliance upon a handful of core service providers that should last at least a week or so. Meanwhile, on the hardware side of things, AMD appears to be just toying with Intel at this point by adding even more X3D CPU variants to its lineup, and some APUs too. The Xe3 versus Xe3P clarification from Intel's GPU team has been reclarified to clear up the recent overclarification, and the best Halloween-themed PC ever to exist has been assembled, with the process documented in a classic Paul's Hardware build video, so just wanted to remind everyone to check that video out, and maybe enter the giveaway too. But with that build and these candles and the pumpkin over here, Halloween festivities are pretty much handled, so let's celebrate with a beer. Cheers, and let's proceed with the tech news.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Thermaltake's View 600 TG full tower chassis, featuring 4 tempered glass panels that provide an unobstructed view of your PC and support for massive 420mm radiators for AIO or custom cooling. Available in 5 distinct and unique colorways, including Future Dusk, the View 600 TG also supports hidden connector and eATX motherboards and includes an anti-sag GPU bracket and rotatable PCIe slots, as well as easily removable ventilation panels and plenty of room for cable management and added storage. There's an optional 6-inch LCD add-on too. For more on the View 600 TG from Thermaltake, click the sponsor link in the video description. It's pretty evident that Intel has no answer for the best gaming CPU on the market right now, the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, so AMD said, we'll just have to beat ourselves. Off to a good start too, AMD is, if this leak is true, but considering the source, Chili Dog, whose very name instills confidence, I have little doubt. The leaker, formerly known as Golden Mango, claims AMD has 2 new X3D CPUs in the works. First, there's the Ryzen 9 9950X3D2, which I will have no problem nicknaming the 9950X3DD, a CPU that's basically a 9950X3D with 2 X3D Vcache enabled CCDs instead of 1. So despite the apparent letters and numbers jumble, the name makes some sense, and double X3D CCDs gives it a whopping 192 megabytes of cache. It also has a slightly reduced 5.6 GHz boost clock down from 5.7 and slightly increased TDP, 200 watts instead of 170. AMD has already been asked about using 2 or more X3D dies in a processor, and they said it was technically possible, though many have speculated that cross-CCD latency penalties might spoil the benefit of having so much cache space available. The 9950X3D2 would be particularly enticing if that die-to-die latency issue could be mitigated somehow, but perhaps more suitable for gaming systems would be the other rumored CPU, the 9850X3D. This one is a more straightforward enhancement of the 9800X3D with identical specs except for a 500 MHz clock increase, bumping the boost to 5.6 GHz instead of 5.1, which, according to my notes, is indeed faster and should be a nice boost for gaming performance in otherwise CPU-limited scenarios. There's no word on prices or launch date if these CPUs indeed exist at all, but given the timing, I expect we'll hear more about them at CES in January. AMD APUs, which are CPUs with relatively more powerful integrated graphics, are not perfect, but they do provide a nice point of entry for PC builders who aren't ready to commit to buying a discrete graphics card. The first generation of this style of chip for the current AM5 platform launched all the way back at the beginning of 2024 though, codenamed Phoenix and somewhat deceptively branded as the 8000G series, even though they still used Zen 4 architecture just like the Ryzen 7000 series of CPUs. Well, it looks like after a 2-year wait, AMD has another line of APUs coming out for desktop PCs, as first noted by HXL on Monday. The latest GISA 1.2.7.0 update seems to indicate Kraken Point and Kraken Point 2 entries, and on Tuesday it was further confirmed by ASUS that new APUs support is indeed part of the patch notes. But will AMD simply release the Kraken on desktop, or will they have a higher-end Strix Point version too? So quick refresher, any APU in this family that AMD is about to release will be a desktop variant of an existing mobile chip. These have been launching throughout 2025 and come in laptops and handheld gaming devices as well as mini PCs, with Point representing the lower-end options like the Ryzen AI 7 350 or the Ryzen AI 5 340, with a maximum of 4 Zen 5 and 4 Zen 5C cores, 8 cores total, as well as RDNA 3.5 graphics. Strix Point is the big brother of Point, with a maximum of 4 Zen 5 and 8 Zen 5C cores, 12 cores total, and up to 16 iGPU compute units. And given the improved cooling options on desktop, many hoped for Strix Point APUs as well, but they weren't mentioned when the news first broke earlier in the week. Fortunately, further data mining by HXL and Zhe Chen has uncovered Strix Point references too, which does not confirm this Ryzen 9000G lineup, but does make it much more probable, with 6, 8, 10, and 12 core options, as well as beefier integrated graphics. And again, based on the timing of all this, I expect we'll see these formally announced at CES in January. Next up, the massive spate of internet service outages that began in the early hours of Monday morning are mostly in the post-mortem phase at this point, but the impact was so widespread that many came to believe that half the internet was down. In fact, the issue was somewhat localized to Amazon's largest cluster of data centers, US East 1 in Northern Virginia. But Amazon Web Services provides their services to a huge range of customers, so when a latent defect in their DynamoDB DNS software broke the connection between website names and their associated IP addresses, more than 1,000 web-based products and services simply stopped working, including websites, social media services like Zoom, Discord, and Snapchat, finance and e-commerce centers like Robinhood and PayPal, game services like Fortnite and Roblox, and perhaps most humorously, web-connected products that had no business requiring an internet connection to function in the first place, like 8 Sleep beds whose occupants woke to find their mattresses stuck on way too hot mode or in the inclined position with no manual bypass to be found. Even Amazon Alexa went down, and even though Amazon stated that all AWS services returned to normal operations as of 6:01 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, the 15-hour or so outage seemed to last much longer, as more time was needed for servers to come back online, DNS address logs to be flushed, and caches to be repopulated. It was at the very least a strong reminder to have a backup plan in case the internet stops working, and if you want a much more technical explanation on how all this happened, I highly recommend this video on the Dave's Garage channel, which maybe you already watched since it has like 550,000 views. Speaking of things you already watched, you might have heard me assure you of the facts regarding Intel's Xe3 and Xe3P GPU architecture in recent weeks, but apparently I was somewhat wrong, as further clarification was needed and indeed provided on the Full Nerd podcast on Tuesday. Tom Peterson returned to assure us that, first, the Xe3 architecture in upcoming Panther Lake mobile CPUs is not celestial, and is in fact a revision of the Xe2 architecture that was used in Battlemage and Lunar Lake. So why is it called Xe3? Well, blame Linux, I suppose. As Tom said, the Xe3 name got decided years ago, and it's actually spread around the Linux stack. And as we all know, removing something from the Linux stack is like removing pee from a swimming pool, or so I'm told. So Intel had no choice but to make this all super confusing. But Tom also said on this very podcast a full year ago that Celestial is done, or the team working on that architecture was all done. So when will there be a product based on it, and what will that product or family of products be? Well, that would be Crescent Island, Intel's new data center AI inferencing GPU due in late 2026, which uses Xe3P architecture, which is a more substantially different architecture than Xe3 was from Xe2. But TAP did dance around the naming issue quite carefully and seemed to only reference Celestial in the past tense, so I still suspect they've modified their plans from the original ARC program and are doing away with the Celestial and Druid naming scheme. Hopefully that doesn't mean they're doing away with further higher-end discrete desktop GPUs as well, but per Phoronix on Thursday, they have confirmed that Intel Nova Lake will use Xe3P, which is already highly suspected as per the recent Linux OpenGL and Vulkan drivers. Speaking of quick segues, tech briefs. Just a couple this week. Intel Arc GPUs aside, Intel's continued viability as a company has been questioned many times this year, and the most important thing they need is a big fab customer. And late last week, They did it! Intel is saved! Rejoice, all ye Team Blue stands! They've secured a significant order from Microsoft to fabricate the Maya 3 AI accelerator chip codenamed Griffin at Intel Foundry on the 18A or 18A-P process. It's a healthy first step, and I'm sure former CEO Pat Gelsinger is proud, but now the discussion turns to yields, which are apparently still on the low side for 18A and ramping up slowly. So Intel isn't out of the woods yet, as improved yields could determine the success or failure of the Maya 3 undertaking and heavily impact further orders from Microsoft or other outside customers. But let's at least finish on some good news for Intel, and for that, we return to their existing fabs. Not quite leading edge anymore, but at least comfortably worn in Intel's 10 and 7 nodes are, despite their misleading names. And per Intel's earnings call Thursday, these nodes are also booked solid and experiencing capacity constraints with volume above expectations. It's not totally clear what chips Intel is fabbing on these nodes, as products like 12th generation Alder Lake CPUs that were made on the 10nm Intel 7 node are now discontinued, but they stated the demand was for both data center and client products. So despite what you may have heard, Intel's not quite dead yet. But there you have it guys, tech news for the week, and if you liked it, click that like button or leave me a comment down below. While you're down there, all of the articles I talked about today are linked in the video's description if you're interested, and you can also check out my store at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, beer sets, and more. Subscribing to my channel is always a good call too. Thanks again everyone, cheers, and we'll see you next week.